just 3 dimensions away from Dune Messiah being called Dune Part 3. I'm your host, 3D Jake, and today we're looking at Dune Part 2, released in 2024. Dune Part 2 is a sequel to Dune Part 1, which is based on the book Dune by Frank Herbert. The movie is once again directed by Denis Villeneuve and is written by Denis Villeneuve and John Spetz. The movie once again stars Timothy Chalamet, Zendaya, this time around Florence Pugh, Austin Butler, once again Javier Bardem, Rebecca Ferguson, Leah Sedux, Stellan Skarsgård, and of course Christopher Walken. The movie is a sequel to the first Dune and picks up right where the first Dune left off. And I really enjoyed this movie, and the movie is so good. When I first, like, again, I've said this before, but when I first saw the first Dune, I didn't really enjoy it that much. I saw it and I was okay, but then it wasn't until like last 2 weeks that I watched it, and I'm like, this is really good, and I was just so blown away by it. So I went and saw it this past weekend, and I'm like, all right, let's see if this is any good or not. I hope it's as good as the first one. And then I watched it, and I was blown away. I had no interest in buying the books or anything like that. I just wanted to watch a movie, and I was like, all right, you know what, this will be fine. If it's not as good as the first one, at least it's something to do. I watched this movie, and oh my god, I was like, there's the Dune Awakening game that they're making cannot get here soon enough because I cannot wait for this game because I want to live in that world more. Like I literally the second it started when them showing like the background, like oh them burning all the bodies of the Atreides and like them burning the portrait of Paul's dad and everything, and then of course like them being still stuck in the desert and Dave Batista getting awarded for betraying the Atreides and everything, and just like it just so much stuff was happening, and you're just like, this is so good. Like how it just started reminding me of Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Deathly Hallows Part 2, where Snape is like at the beginning of Hogwarts, like he's just sitting there seeing like all the Death Eaters escorting the students to their classes, and it just reminded me something of that. It just reminded me of like like how the bad guys won, and they're sitting there glooming and enjoying their glory of their betrayal. And so basically, and then just it starts out with like the good guys in the desert, and I just like how it starts out with like them sending the bad guy, the emperor's, they're sending out the the emperor's last remaining men of the emperor's assassins out to the out to they're looking for the Atreides, or not even looking for the Atreides, they're just looking for terrorists. And of course, then when I look for it, then they get killed, because they see a sandworm, and so they're like, oh shit, there's a sandworm coming. So they climb up there, like, oh, there's no sandworm. Then they get sniped to death, and then they take their blood, they drink their blood, and I'm like, oh, that's just so creepy and everything. And they steal all their loot and everything. It really was interesting, and just to see how like the mom is pregnant, and of course like Paul is like out there. They're just trying to survive because like look, they're out to kill us, and the one if they think we're alive, they're gonna try to kill us. And so it kind of let it be known that it doesn't really tell you in the movie. I mean, maybe it does, but from what I understand, I thought that like they didn't know that they thought they were dead. So I was like, so they're hunting them. But I'm like, didn't they Dave Batista say that they were dead? So it doesn't really. I don't think it really explains. I mean, I could have, but from what I understood, I don't think it explains if they thought they were dead or not. I assume that they thought they were dead. But like I really enjoyed this movie. The movie's so good, like the visual cinematography, the acting. Like Timothy Chalamet, when the first movie, I'm like, he's supposed to be the warrior, the hero. I really didn't buy that. He was the warrior, the hero of this movie. I'm sitting there watching this movie, going, "There's no way he's the hero of this movie." Like at the first Dune. By the end of the second movie, I'm like, yes, he is the hero he's meant to be, because the whole movie is kind of like Empire Strikes Back, where Yoda's training Luke to be this great warrior, where you see him in A New Hope, he's like they build Luke up, and then by the time you get to Empire, when he's fighting Vader at the end in Hoth, or not Hoth, but I'm so sorry, in Cloud City, he literally is literally like okay, yeah, and then by the time you get to Return of the Jedi, he is that it's even better, So I think by the time we get to the end of this movie, Paul Atreides is able to face off against Austin Butler's character Vade, and he's just so good. Like I mean, I will say, I like how they train him, like show him how to ride a sandworm. They show him like how he already knows how to fight, but like they show him like like how to be this terrorist to like the arachnids, because they're literally gonna like kill you when they find you. And so I like all that stuff. I'm like liking how like they're training him and everything like that. Like oh, you have to walk across all the way to that mountain and back. And so just like stuff like that is where it had me like oh yeah, and everything's in the day is following him, and you see them bond and build up a romance to where they're falling in love with each other. Then you see like his mom has to become the this witch because they're like, look, the last woman we had, she's a witch. She has to become this god, the priest or whatever, because like this one is old. So then but she doesn't let him know she's pregnant. So when she drinks it, then all of a sudden, she has her baby is and getting that toxic too. So her baby's talking to her. Who her baby is played by Anya Taylor Joy, who she has a cameo as her, but she's the voice throughout the whole movie. But she has a cameo as her physical self, which I'm sure she'll appear in the third film. And so, basically she's talking to her, like saying like Paul will be a great leader and everything. And Paul keeps seeing visions like if I go to the south, I'm going to win this war. But the thing is though, I will be a tyrant. I don't want to be a tyrant. I don't want people to die under my watch because lots of people will die. And I don't want that. He keeps seeing visions of like a woman and walking across all these dead bodies. And it's his mother, and he's just scared, and that scares him. And so he's like, I'd rather be here. And it feels almost like he's a coward to do this. And I really enjoy that, and we get to see, you know, I like how like they do terrorist missions where basically like they'll send something to spice to mine spice, they'll just blow it up and everything. I like how like at one point they go and like there's like a helicopter there and they're shooting them down, trying to kill them and everything, and they're just trying to blow up. And they're hiding behind things, and all of a sudden they shoot a rocket and they blow the helicopter up, and then they're like, and then all of a sudden then they blow up the mining spice, and then Dave Batista like eventually gets in trouble, and they're like, like they're causing like the Emperor's gonna be on me and everything. They get onto Dave Batista, and Dave Batista then goes and sends assassins to blow up all the mountains and stuff. And then of course like they end up getting Dave Batista. Then they go get a bunch of killed. I love that. I love that. It was thought was so great. I also like how whenever like the backstory with Vade, Austin Butler's character, where he's like a psychopath and he's like a warrior. He's the nephew of just a Baron, and basically here's birthday he gives him like the last two Atreides, and so one of them they don't drug, and so like he ends up killing the other two men. But then he's like that one guy gives him a good fight, and then Hasama turns off his shield, and he's just like, and then he fights him fairly, and then kills him, and he tells him like, you said you tried to kill me, I should drown you in your bath. And he's like, you won, and like it made people love you because you won, you fought a fair fight. It's like just that, and like he's like, I'm gonna make you emperor, which I had some issues with that. I'm like, you're gonna make him emperor, but then would he be overpowering you? Like once you want to be emperor and then make him your under, I mean that just made no sense to me. And also like there's a couple things I had issue with, like at the end when Baron like the emperor cuts his wires and he's just like breathing out, he can't breathe or nothing, and he's just trying to like climb up the throne. I'm like, what's gonna happen? He sits on the throne. I mean, I don't think I still kill him because the emperor is the emperor. If he's sitting on the throne, does that make him emperor? I mean, it just made no sense to me. Why he's trying to crawl for the throne. I mean, maybe it's just he's trying to clean the power as much as he can. I guess maybe. And also, I thought there's one other thing I thought was like, okay, it builds up to them like Paul becoming a warrior and everything, and it builds up to everything. Okay, but like wouldn't Paul like the whole thing is like the arachnids are basically the villain of the movie. Okay, you know shouldn't they have like it never explains like what happened to like okay when the woman was a baby and everything they hand off because Baron's her father. They never explain like what he did with it. Like he just you see a flashback of him like looking at her and I'm just like because she wasn't bald they were just like let's just get rid of her. I mean just stuff like that where I was like well he just gave it to the witches. I mean I don't know, it just doesn't really it never explain that part and it kind of confused me a little bit. I did enjoy that the big third back battle. I like how they're basically seeing Paul as Jesus. They're Muslim, like the religion in the desert is more like a Muslim culture religion where they're basically they worship him like he's Jesus, like he's the second coming, he's the Messiah. And so they're like, he basically gives that speech where he keeps trying not to be this hero, and like there's like one group of people like Javier Reyna worship him like he's God, while the other half are like, no, you're not the Messiah, you're just like a boy. And so basically, yeah, the two that's where the terrorists, the rebel group, they're basically they draw the line where it's like half of them believe he's the second coming, the other half don't believe he's just another kid, and so wherever like it really brings that down to that confliction wherever they're like at the end they're like no we're not and he finally has to accept his fate and he's like we're gonna go south, and eventually she's like I don't want to go south, I will die here. Because when I destroy the temple, which I also kind of wish they would have showed that. That was my issue too. I wish they would have shown the temple, like all the people be running around getting shot by the missiles and everything. But instead, we see the aftermath. I kind of was bummed by that because I'm like, I want to see it happen, and everything. But I did enjoy that. We got to see like the aftermath still, and we got to see like the bad guys show up there, and this woman's like, I'll die for I talk. And like, we're gonna torture you. And Austin Butler's like, I'm still gonna torture you. And I like how Austin Butler comes in the picture and he's taking over Arachne. And he's like, he makes Dave Bautista kiss his feet for for being doing such a shitty job at the spicing money. And so he's just gonna be a psychopath with his role and everything. And basically, I love how Paul Atreides he builds up an army. He leads his army there, and they see like just like the emperor's like going to Arachne, his army like we're gonna scout them out, we're gonna kill them all, and then they see giant sandworms just like boom, and then like all of a sudden they're like running. It just reminded me of the final season of Game of Thrones when the dragon shows up and burns all these people in King's Landing, all the Golden Army, you know, like whenever like that to me was just like awesome. And I also love how like you see like one side they're getting sandworms, the other side they're all like the rebels are just coming and killing them all. That's what I just loved. I'm like, oh, this is getting really good, and all of a sudden you see all the sandworms, and so then of course whenever there's like Paul walks in there, like you just see like he kills Baron, stabs him in the neck, and calls him grandfather, stabs him in the neck. That to me had me. I was like, yes. And then like Austin Butler just stands back and he's like smiling because he's like like, and then of course the emperor like they took the temple, so he's like, take him to his room, we won. And it was like, lay down your arms, we won. So he kind of do lay down arms, and it was like, and then like the emperor thinks he's out the advantage because he's like, oh, see how they're gonna come here. He's like, doesn't matter. He goes, I hold the planet, and so he's like, you know what? And he goes, so they challenge Austin Butler's like, challenge me to a fight. I'll be your warrior. And them two fight. So Josh Brolin's like, I do like Josh Brolin in this movie because he kind of plays. It kind of does play with, is he gonna betray Paul or not? Because you're like, oh, he's gonna betray. I was thinking when I was watching the movie, Josh Brolin's character, I'm like, he's a traitor working for Baron and them, and that was the deal. Because I made a deal to like get off the planet, my men off the planet. I'm thinking that's the deal. He's like, a life for a life. He's gonna turn Paul and the rebels over, and then they're gonna kill, and then he's just gonna be betrayed again. I'm like, nope, that wasn't the case. Excuse me. But the plan was like I don't know what the plan was, but like that I do like that they reunite, and then basically he's like, let me fight him, and he's like, no, I want to fight him, and they fight, and then he gets stabbed in the gut by him, and he's like, then he finally stabs him in the heart, and he's like, you're my cousin. He goes, and he says, I killed my cousins before, and it's just like Austin Butler is so good in that role. And it even sounds just like Stellan Skarsgård. And I'm like, he's going walking Phoenix in this role. Like I like how he's starting to become a method actor, where he's like he tries to imitate Stellan Skarsgård, like he is his uncle. Even there's even a creepy kiss in the movie where they don't kiss, and he goes, and, like he shows you he's a great character in this movie, especially when they fight at the end of the death. That was a great scene where he dies, and then Paul becomes and he says, "You yield." He said, "You surrender power to me, and I'll marry your daughter." And then afterwards, he said, "We'll bear children, and I'll become emperor." And then he says, "And if so, and if they don't take me as their emperor, we're gonna destroy and declare war on them." And then of course he's like, he yields and says, "You can have my daughter." And she goes, "Yes, I'll marry you if you spare my father's life." And he goes, he has to kiss the ring, and he does. And then of course like Zendaya's like kind of messed up. Like, I thought we were together. Now you're gonna get with her. And then how he just like it's kind of like he's becoming that leader that he should be. He's becoming almost like a tyrant. And it kind of like, and then how I like how at the end how like all the rebels that believe in him get in their ships, and they go and they're gonna go and attack the other ships. Like it's basically like he's becoming a dictator tyrant. He's become what the emperor was, essentially. And the emperor would be more of a tolerable person that deals with politics. While I think more of this is revenge of like, hey, like you betrayed my house. All you people betrayed my house, plotted against us. Now we're taking our revenge. And I do also think that his mom's kind of controlling the strings in a way where it's like, it's like his future is becoming true as you see it become. So that's when Dune Messiah, that's going to be the third movie. That's going to be like that future we see. And I think that's really well done. I like how Zendaya leaves him at the end, and like how he just becomes this futuristic tyrant. It really it shows like, it also reminded me of Game of Thrones, the final season with Daenerys. And I'm like, oh, it's okay for Paul Atreides to kill, be a tyrant and kill a bunch of people. That's called good writing. But when the showrunners for Game of Thrones do it, oh, that's called bad writing. I'm like, oh yeah, I see how it is. I'm just like saying that. But yeah, I do think that this is a great movie. It's fantastic. If you haven't seen it, yeah, I will say I think it is the best movie of the year. Even though we haven't finished the year, we're just at the beginning of the year. This is the best movie of the year. I have not seen a movie as good as this. Like honestly, I can't see any other movie being as good as this. I'm sure there'll be great movies this year, but this is like a 10 out of 10. It's gonna be very hard to top this movie. But that's gonna be my grade. My grade is, if I had to give this movie a grade, I would give it an A plus. Thank you so much.
He who can destroy a thing has the real control of it.